Hello, everybody. Nice to be here and having the chance to talk with you about IDPS, Intrusion Detection Prevention Solution, including the VSOC, the Vehicle Security Operations Center, or what we call the Immune System for Connected Vehicle Fleets. My name is Jan. I'm with ETAS, the security branch of ETAS called ESCRYPT, and I'm in automotive security since 2009, and I'm currently working as the product field manager for our IDPS portfolio here at ETAS. So our goal is really to monitor the security of vehicle fleets, understand if we see incidents, and then really react on that. My background is in security consulting and in product management. I also had the chance to have a diploma in computer science and a PhD thesis in electrical engineering, all with the subject of automotive security. And I'm happy to be part of the ETAS ESCRYPT family since 2013. IDPS, Intrusion Detection Prevention Solutions. We at ESCRYPT, we like to say it's also a kind of the immune system for connected vehicle fleets. And I'm more than happy to basically talk about this today with you here at the ETAS Korean online conference. Why do we say the immune system for connected vehicle fleets? Because you could really use the analogy to the immune system of the human body and the technology solution for intrusion detection and prevention for connected vehicle fleets. We will paint this picture in just a second and compare what is happening basically in the human immune system if it is infected, basically, so it's under attack, versus what's happening actually in our connected vehicle fleets. And you will see that you can have really quite some similar observations here. We will have then a look to the question, okay, what is the global perspective? So not only what is happening in Korea, but what is also happening on a global perspective, because we know a lot of you, customers are really selling a lot on a global level in the different markets. And so therefore, we believe it's helpful to also give you a little bit of insight what's happening on the global IDPS market. And then we will also have the chance to look into the technology level of IDPS. So really what's inside of this IDPS words. So what kind of components you want to have, what kind of technologies you want to have to be supported. And we will split this into an in-vehicle portion and an off-board portion, which is in the area of what is called a Vehicle Security Operations Center. And for sure, we will also have the chance for a conclusion. So let's directly get into the immune system picture here. So to the left-hand side, we see a strong ESCRYPT human being, but for sure you could think about yourself. And what we see here is basically what is happening in the human body if there is an infection. So in the very beginning, we are just in the situation that we have the recognition phase. So there is almost no response from our immune system because we are even not aware that we are infected, meaning attacked. And then there's multiple techniques the human body has to basically really activate the immune system response. It's called clonal expansion and activation. We do not want to get too much into the details of that, but basically you start the immune system response so that the system is able to, basically the body to prevent the further infection and get healthy again. And so the effector is taking really response, and by that basically also the immune system response is going down because the infection is not that severe anymore. And you all notice you start to feel better after an infection. And now there's a very interesting phase, which is the declining phase, and then especially the memory cell generation. Luckily, we as human beings, we are learning from an infection. So we do have an infection and we learn from it so that we are better prepared for next time, so that our body can better react on that. So we really improve our immune system by learning about infections. And that is very similar to attacks in the connected vehicle fleets. Let's have a picture here. So what we see here on the upper part is basically the adaptive immune system of the human body. And what we see on the lower part is comparable steps in an intrusion detection and prevention system. So from left to the side, we see attacks coming in basically. And the very first thing which we need to do really is to enable our systems, our connected vehicles and our cars to monitor what's ongoing in the system, and to understand that basically there is an attack. And then basically on this information to really detect very specifically this attack and understand, okay, is it really an attack or is it just an anomaly and we can ignore it? So monitor and detection is the two things which you want to do in in the vehicle to be ready to understand that there is attacks on the vehicle fleet. And if you compare this with the human immune system, that's exactly this recognition phase. So we get our system ready to understand basically, okay, here's an attack. And from there on, we do have the analysis phase. So we really need to understand, okay, what is this attack about? Yeah? And how could we basically stop this attack also? So this is what is happening in the attack phase, and as the in the analysis phase, and as the analysis is done, we could really then define the response and really roll out the response so that basically the attack is stopped. And very similar in the human body, as the human body understood how to counter the infection, it will send out a response with all the clever things our immune system can do to really stop the actual infection. So very similar. And then, and that's also very interesting, we also have the recovery phase and the immunization phase. So the human body, as mentioned, learns about, okay, this was an infection and this was the way I fight it against this infection. And so the human body is ready to do this next time faster, more efficient. Same here with connected vehicle fleets. We learn about the attacks, which we have seen. We learn about the responses which we have applied, so we can faster and more efficiently apply them next time. So you can really easily see that the immune system for the human body is kind of comparable with the immune system for connected vehicle fleets if we talk about intrusion detection and prevention solutions. So, and interestingly, this is not only a theory, something which we may want to, let's say, study in university or so, but this is also really, let's say, considered in practice. And one area where we see this is basically the global legislation landscape. So if we look into our example again from the health system, then to the left-hand side, we see how the health management, the management of disease and infections is organized in our global community. It really starts from health regulations, often involving the World Health Organization. It comes down to individual rules and laws, maybe even for countries. Yeah, and then it actually comes down to us as people, so that we are basically prepared in the situation of an ongoing infection or, for example, pandemic. If we move to the right, this is what's happening currently in automotive industry, and that's very interesting. So we also saw that the UNECE organization understood, so basically on a global level, that cybersecurity is super important to have safe vehicles on the street. And because they understood this, they introduced some regulations for type approval, which will be now considered by the countries following this type approval scheme, and will be used in local legislation and laws depending on the actual legal system. And so the enterprises, the OEMs, have to comply with that to have secure vehicles, to consider the best knowledge about security and have cybersecurity management in place to fulfill at the end of the day the goal of having safe and secure cars on the street. And very precisely, this is now reflected in what we call the UN Regulation 155, and also parts of that is in 156. So this is two regulations which now needs to be fulfilled and addressed during type approval. And what it basically say, especially 155, is you need to have a cybersecurity management system. So you need to really, in a professional way, manage the cybersecurity of your vehicles and your vehicle fleets. There's a lot of processual work to be done. So, and I really, if you haven't looked into that, recommend you to start right now because this is very, very, let's say, urgent topic because it applies very soon. Yeah. To get your organization and your processes and everything ready for the cybersecurity. But there's also some interesting technical topics in this regulation. And we would say there is a discipline which is called detection and responding to security incidents across the vehicle fleet. So what you need to prove basically during type approval, that you are able to detect that your vehicles are attacked and that you can respond in a timely manner to this security incidents in an appropriate way to again ensure the security of your vehicle fleet. Now, this is a regulation which was just actually adopted by the UNECE in 2020. And what is now really interesting is it is already, let's say, enforced and applies to vehicles in Europe from July 2022. This is for new vehicle types, so totally newly developed vehicles, but it's also applying to vehicles which have been already developed in the past, where there is already a type approval available, but which will be still registered. So that means even if you have old vehicle platforms, you cannot easily say we will sell them after, in this case, July 2024, because you also need to comply for this old legacy vehicle systems to the UNECE regulation, including the capabilities to detect and respond to security incidents across the vehicle fleet. So the UN regulation is a very interesting document because it has a huge legal framework discussing like the principles of how to be done things, but it also includes a very technical chapter, and that is rare, I would say, in such kind of regulations. So let's have a look inside of that. So people typically ask us and customers, hey, if we look into the UN regulation, does it really require us to have IDPS, intrusion detection prevention solutions? And the truth is, there is not a clear statement you need to have exactly that technology, or you need to exactly buy the ESCRYPT product, while I recommend. But there is very, very concrete requirements in the document, which are actually hard to fill without such kind of an IDPS solution. So here I brought some of the excerpts from the document, and the most interesting chapter here is basically the Annex 5, so-called. Because in the Annex 5, what we see is a very good summary of typical vehicle threats. So what can happen to an actual vehicle, and then also typical countermeasures. So it's a kind of a recommendation list, things you can do and which are also, let's say, field proven, so they are available on the market, basically. It's not theory, it's basically really available technologies here. And in this section, for example, you find information here that you should have the capability to detect malicious internal messages on the bus, for example, CAN bus, or that you should be able to detect unauthorized deletion manipulation of system logs, because an attacker will try to hide himself by deleting logs, or that you also need to be able to detect the denial of service attack, like flooding on the buses, for example, again, the CAN bus. So this is very concrete technical examples. And if you think about having an IDPS system to fulfill UN regulations, I absolutely recommend you to review the Annex 5 and think about the solution I'm thinking about. Will it address all these areas, all these potential threats in a meaningful way, meaning do I at least achieve what is described in the Annex 5 and what we can consider as, in the area of best practice, I would say. So this is basically the UN perspective, and the UN regulation applies to a lot of countries, most of Europe, a lot of countries in Asia. And there's also some other countries currently adopting such kind of regulations, which are not part of UNECE. And there's one country which even, let's say, tends to do more in that area, and that's China. I think China is also a very important market for you as the Korean automotive industry. And what we see in China is that there's a lot of work on legislation and standards in the area of cybersecurity. So this is just a summary, which we did some months ago. And at that given point in time, there was 97 standards on cybersecurity work in progress in China, and 11 legislative activities. Most of them are meanwhile advanced and are really in place, either as a standard or as a legal requirement. And the interesting thing is that for sure the Chinese legislation also has a type approval part, which is very similar actually to the R155 and 156 on UN level, but they also have very, very concrete technical requirements. And I don't go into the details today, but there is really some of the standards and legislations describe in particular which kind of detection you need to achieve, and they go as far as even formulating the tests, the test cases which you need to perform to show that your IDPS system is capable to address those topics which are required by the legal legislation and the standards. And as mentioned, it's at least on the very same level as what we see from the requirements of the UN. It's even going to be farther than what we have seen in that. So in a nutshell, we can say the human immune system is kind of comparable to what we see in IDPS. That is our immune system for the connected vehicle fleets. This is not only a technical theoretical topic, but it's also understood by legislators. And so therefore, we now see requirements on a global level to really introduce IDPS capabilities to be ready to protect the vehicles securely for the whole vehicle lifetime. That's basically the big topics which we look into today. And now let's have a little bit a deeper look into what does this actually mean from a technology stack. So in-vehicle IDPS technologies, we can basically categorize them by network IDS, host-based IDS, and firewalls, and also the distribution framework. We will come to that later. But first, let's have a look basically how this is really along still our immune system example. So if we take the immune system, then we can have this green box here. So the monitoring and detection part, this is the two things you want to do in the vehicle. So how does this look like? So in the vehicle, you want to have what we call network intrusion detection systems. So this is, you want to monitor the communication in the vehicle, mainly CAN and Ethernet, and you want to detect anomalies in this communication. So things we haven't expected actually. And these topics then, so these anomalies, they are interesting for further analyze. Yeah. So actually interesting is these anomalies are not necessarily security relevant. So we detect with our systems a lot of anomalies which are actually not security relevant, but which are very much helpful, especially for validation experts to understand the quality of the vehicle. Yeah. So therefore, let's say we look for anomalies which are potentially connected to security, and we do this at least on CAN and on Ethernet. Also, we want to ensure that any kind of communication in the vehicle is filtered according to the communication policies of the customers. So this is typically done in gateways. Yeah? So therefore, you usually have a communication matrix which says which kind of communication is appropriate between different networks on CAN. And this is also now a requirement for Ethernet. And so therefore, part of the network intrusion detection system for Ethernet, or I would even say the network IDPS, intrusion detection prevention system solution, is also SecurGate, which is an Ethernet firewall to block and control all the Ethernet traffic in the vehicle running in central components like gateways and so on. So in total, that means what you want to have is you want to think about how do I monitor my in-vehicle networks? How do I ensure that only appropriate communication is taking place? And then whatever I see an anomaly, I can learn about it. Also, I want to search for specific attack patterns. We call them signatures. So there is some kind of communication which can be anticipated after, let's say, analyzing your vehicles, which would occur if an attacker will actually attack your vehicle. Think about a kind of a diagnostic communication, for example, while the vehicle is at speed, which should never happen. Yeah, but it's a typical sign that an attacker tries to compromise the vehicle. So such kind of communication behavior can be described as signatures, and we look for both. We look for anomalies, so meaning things which should not happen given the expected communication, and we look in particular for attack signatures, which clearly indicates that somebody is trying to compromise the vehicle. That's network IDS. Then the next thing is what we call host-based IDS. The host-based IDS has the very same goal, but not for the networks, but for the actual ECUs. We want to learn if somebody is trying to hack an ECU. Think about a classical EE architecture with a communication unit. Yeah, for sure, best case, we could already detect that somebody is attacking this ECU before the attacker maybe make its way into the vehicle. So easily you can see what you want to do is you want to do network IDS to monitor all the network, and you want to do host-based IDS to monitor what's happening with the actual ECUs. And now you may ask, okay, now do I have two IDSs? Maybe I have more instances of that. What to do with all the data? For this, there is the IDS distribution framework. There's the IDS manager component, which will collect all the security-related events on one ECU. And there is an IDS reporter, which will collect all this information collected already by the IDS managers inside of the vehicle and eventually send them out for further analysis. So this is basically how the system is working. And at ETAS, we are totally happy that we can say we have the complete portfolio for you. We can do the Ethernet and IP firewalling. We can do the IDS for CAN and Ethernet. We can have host-based IDS on your ECUs. And we can also have the complete distribution framework, the IDS manager components, and the IDS reporter. So as already mentioned, eventually the data is sent out to the Vehicle Security Operations Center, and I come to that point in a minute, but for the time being, it's good enough to know the IDS reporter is sending out the data to offboard analysis. Yeah, the next picture is maybe a little bit, let's say, crowdy also, but you easily see this is a kind of a EE architecture of the vehicle, and actually this is a zonal EE architecture. So the interesting thing is we do have zone ECUs in each area of the vehicle, like in the front left and the rear and so on. And these zone ECUs take control of all the vehicle functionality happening there, independently of domains. If it is movement, or if it is heating, or if it is infotainment, doesn't matter. The zone ECU in that area will take care for all the functionality which is needed for that in that area. So this is a really new trend in EE architectures, really bringing zonal EE architectures, and many OEMs already adopt that because it has very much benefits, especially from an efficiency point of view, because you need less cabling, you need less ECUs, so less wide, and by all that you can really save cost, and you can also increase the distance you can ride with your car. So, and what is shown on this picture is basically if you take the zone ECUs, where you could see the IDS manager components, where you can see basically the IDS reporter component, and where you can basically also see the different IDS components, basically the bigger one and the smaller ones, all is depicted here. So this gives you a small indication that if you think about a new EE architecture design or rework of an existing one, you really want to consider a complete monitoring concept for your vehicle to really catch all the different attacks. All right, that's enough for today for the vehicle. Now let's switch into the backend portion and the offboard portion. So the backend and offboard portion is really this area. So in our immune system, it starts from the actual analysis based on the data. It is the definition of the response and rollout of that, and then also the immunization. So meaning remember what was happening so that you're able next time to really trigger the response faster, and maybe also inherit some of that into the vehicles. So what is a VSOC now really? So this is a simplified picture on what is a VSOC, a Vehicle Security Operations Center. So to the left-hand side, we see basically the vehicles which are connected to the Vehicle Security Operations Center. It's the connected vehicle fleet of the OEM. The OEM is usually connecting those vehicles to their own OEM vehicle backend because they don't want multiple connectivities from the vehicle, but they really want to have one controlled link, and we appreciate that from a security point of view. In this OEM vehicle backend, there's also more data. So for example, there's classical IT systems, but there's also vehicle databases, which for example know which kind of components are in a concrete car. And also, as already mentioned, a fleet data backend, which is among others collecting the IDS data. All this information is provided to the VSOC, the Vehicle Security Operations Center. And the VSOC consists of basically 3 levels. The one is people. Now let me start with the platform. The one is platform. So you need technical infrastructure to basically collect all the information. There's a lot of data coming in, and you need to have a good IT infrastructure to process all the data, have analytics capabilities, maybe some AI and so on. So this is really infrastructure. And then you need people to really work with this data. We believe at ESCRYPT that you need security experts to work with the data. We don't believe that you can do everything automatically. You still will need the people, the experts, to really dig into that. And those people will follow processes, how they do that and how they communicate with the customers and the partners and so on, like playbooks describing the actual things to be done. And what is actually then coming out of the VSOC is basically really incident response. That means they remove all the false positives, so all the noise, and they aggregate all the incident data which is related to the actual attack, and they contextualize that. So they provide additional information which is maybe not available in the initial data point which comes from the vehicle. And this data is then the incident response, and this is actionable information. So meaning it describes what is the actual problem and how could it be potentially fixed. And that's basically then really also in the OEM responsibility. We are happy to support with that, but it's really their responsibility to say, okay, what do we now actually really do against this attack, and then implement this response and roll it out again to the vehicle fleet. If we follow that, we come to a continuous protection cycle, and that is what we want to achieve. Actually, we want to continuously protect our vehicles. So maybe just to show you a picture about it, that is one step more into the technology stack. So very briefly, down here is again the vehicle fleets. It's also a very, very relevant topic for commercial vehicles. So most of the commercial vehicle companies are already on that, basically really implementing IDPS solutions, which are connected again to the vehicle backend of the OEM. And then putting all the data into the VSOC. And here you see this a little bit more detailed. So you need a data ingest component, which we call CycleGuard, which is available from us to ingest all the IDS events, but also pull data from the vehicle database of the customer, and then inject the data into the so-called SOC platform. SOC is the Security Operations Center, where there is basically additional threat intelligence injected as well. And then there is basically analysts really working with this data, identifying the actual security attacks and taking afterwards action. Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell what IDPS is about. So we have seen it's very comparable to the human immune system, and it can help to make our vehicle fleets as protected as we are as human beings. This is really necessary because we have a changing threat landscape. We cannot know what will be the attacks of tomorrow. So we do our very best to have secure vehicles on the street today, but we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So you need to be ready basically to address also future attacks. And this is actually what IDPS is about. It's also not that it's only a technology concept, it's also regulated. It's requested by regulators worldwide, globally now. I mentioned the UNECE regulation, the regulations in China, but there's more on the way in different other countries and regions. And our offering as ESCRYPT is really, we can bring you the complete IDPS portfolio. We are also happy to give you individual components if you want to do things yourself or you want to do it with other partners. So we have a totally modular system, but we are more than happy to also provide you with the end-to-end IDPS solution, including the in-vehicle portion and the VSOC. And our overall goal is really to get in a position where we can monitor and detect what's happening in our vehicles. We can analyze and define the appropriate response, and we can give this back to the vehicle fleets to be prevented against any known attack. And then the thing starts all over and all over again. As long as the vehicle is on the street, along the vehicle's lifetime, we want to have continuous security monitoring and prevention. For further reading, we are happy to share with you that we have also a white paper about the immune system for connected vehicle fleets. It's available via our website, and we recorded a lot of webinars, which you can absolutely, let's say, watch yourself. And for sure, whenever you have actual additional questions, we are more than happy to help you with our global team of security experts, also locally in Korea. Please get in contact with the colleagues, and we can absolutely help you to define your concepts in IDPS and get it on the street. We have done this for multiple customers in Europe, in other regions of the world. We are happy to support you whenever there is a need. So let's keep our connected vehicle fleet secure. Bye-bye.